Shlema.
Amen. Amen. We're on Samach Heyomid Beis. I'm just gonna go back to review because the Gemara is going to refer back to the Shitas of Rabbi Eliezer. So we're just going to read the actual Shitas and then we'll go back. The Gemara refers to the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer, and then we have the Brisa of Tziner, just so we'll have it for reference when the Gemara brings it again. So the first thing is 6 lines down from the top. Tanuraban, Hamaychas Abayis, someone who sells a house, Machas Adeles, Asanaga, Asaminoil, includes the door and the bolt and the lock. Avlayis Amaftech, but not the key. Machar Asamachteshes, Hachakuka. If someone sells, when he sells the house, he also sells the mortar, the thing that's used for grinding up his spices, if it was carved out. Avlayis Hakavua. So the understanding of that is, if he sold a machteshes that had previously been a piece of, let's say, stone that you made a hole in it, you made a depression in it to grind out spices, that's included. But not if it was at first, it was first made and then afterwards stuck into the ground, attached to the ground. Machar as a strubel. A strubel is a wooden structure that was used to hold a mill, a rechaim, right? A rechaim is used to grind up. This is a personal rechaim. It's not talking about a commercial rechaim, but it's used to hold this rechaim in place. Avalayas akeles, but not the container that you use to put the tua into the rechaim. These are all things that are not permanent. Right. He disagrees with what we said before about the distinction that the Tanakama had said between a mortar, a machteshes, that was first made and then attached to the ground, and a mortar where there was a rock and you carved out a piece of it. He says, regardless, it doesn't make a difference. He says anything, even if you first made it into a mortar and then attached to the ground, it's still going to be considered to be part of the ground and it's going to be sold along with the house. Okay, that's the part that's relevant to us. Now we'll skip a few lines to the next Tanur Rabbanan, 3 lines down. That's the din of Rebbe Eliezer, the machlekes, the Tanakama and Rebbe Eliezer, which seems to be whether something that was first made and later attached to the ground is going to be considered to be part of the karka and part of the house when you sell it. We say it over here, Lagabi, it's not really a din of Gabi. Whether it's karka, it's over here, it's specifically Lagabi, the din of whether it's sold as a house. Then we said, someone who had a pipe that he first created the pipe by, let's say he carves it out of a log of wood. He makes it into a pipe. And then he attached it to the ground. And then rainwater falls into it, and this pipe directs the rainwater into a mikvah. It passes the mikvah, even though you attach it to the ground. Since it was first made into a kli, it remains a kli, and therefore the water in it is mayim she'uvim. Mayim she'uvim, the chamu masakin, that when mayim she'uvim comes into a mikvah, it passes it. Midaraisa, as we're going to see later on, Midaraisa, mayim she'uvim only passes a mikvah if the mikvah was first made with mayim she'uvim. But water that is added to a mikvah with mayim she'uvim would not passel it. It would become bottled to the water that's already in the mikvah, and it wouldn't be possible. But midirabanan, they were misakin that any mayim she'uvim passes a mikvah. However, if it's the other way around, if you had a piece of a log that was in the ground, attached to the ground, or a rock that was in the ground, and you carved a pipe into that rock, doesn't pass. The mikveh doesn't get a din of a kli. So the Gemara asks, this second Bryce that was saying is not like Rebbe Lazar and not like the Rabban. So the Gemara asks, we don't have to chaza this part, but we asked maybe the previous machlokes that we had, Lagabi bias, is where we see that Rebbe Eliezer holds. That's the reason why Rebbe Eliezer can't hold like this, because Rebbe Eliezer had said, even if you first carve out a machteshes, and then you put it into the ground, it's still sold along with the house. That seems to say that it's karka. So the Gemara answered, no, that's not a raya. That could be talking about hamoicha b'ayin yafa moicha. It's not necessarily reflective of this brisa. It doesn't indicate how Rebbe Eliezer would say on this brisa of tzina shechaku b'sayf kav. So now let's skip the Ella Rebbe Eliezer to Kever. So we're going to go to where we got up to yesterday, 3 lines from the bottom. That was not a bad summation. Ella Rebbe Eliezer, at least to get back where we were before. I indulged myself because this is a pretty hard but small blot. So I figured it's better to do that. So let's say that this statement, that this brisa of sinur shechakul b'soif kavu passes the mikveh, that we said it's not like Rebbe Eliezer, not like the Rabbanon. We're first focusing on the Rebbe Eliezer part of it. We said it's not like Rebbe Eliezer. Let's say it's a different Rebbe Eliezer. Rebbe Eliezer Rebbe Eliezer of a beehive. A beehive, the Gemara's understanding at this point is someone takes you create a bee, you make a hive, you build a box, and then you stick it on the ground. Rebbe Eliezer the Kever's Dvarim, the Tanakh. We learned in the mission. Kever's Dvarim, a beehive. Rebbe Eliezer Aimer Harei Karka. It has a din as karka. When you attach it to the ground, it becomes part of the ground. And therefore, kaisen a prusbul, you could write on it a prusbul. So the din of a prusbul is, right, at the end of, when Shemitah comes, all debts are canceled. The Chamu Masakin, that you can write a prusbul, you can write a contract, which transfers your debts over to the Bezdin. So by transferring it to Bezdin, it no longer, Shemitah is does not deal with, does not cause any problems. So, but the one restriction of that is prusbul can only be written for someone who has some karka. You have to have real property. You have to have karka that the prusbul should take effect on.
But the lender has to have property?
Yes. The lender, I'm sorry, that the borrower has property. The Chachamim, the Rashbam gives a long explanation of it, but generally the rule is you can't force someone to pay. The din of Shemitah is you can't go after the person who owes you money to pay. If someone has a mashkin, because of this rule, the Chacham said the halachas midaraisa. If someone has a mashkin, their debts are not canceled by Shemitah. So the Chamu Misakin, their din of prusbul, to be similar to the general din that Shemitah is not mishamet. Shemitah doesn't cancel a debt that has a mashkin. So they wanted to make this prusbul similar in that sense, that the person has karka, which seems like something that could be a mashkin, a person could use to get the money from. That's the way they were misakin. It's takanas chacham, and that's the way they were misakin. But the bottom line is that in order for a prusbul to work, the person who borrowed the money has to have karka. So we're saying that this keveres dvarim qualifies as karka. It doesn't. It's not makabel tuma. something that a kli that is, in order for something to be makabel tumah, something has to be a kli. Something there's other. I mean, a person can be makabel tumah and mashkin, but we're not talking about. Obviously, this is none of those things. But since it's part of the ground, so therefore it's not a kli. It's not. It doesn't become tummy. And finally, this is another example of it being considered karka. And someone who takes honey out of it on Shabbos is chayav chatas. You're not allowed to take things from the karka, right? Just like you're not allowed to reap your tvua, you're not allowed to cut your tvua from the ground. So taking the honey from the keveres dvayrim, which is attached to the ground, since it's considered like karka, it's like you're taking something from the ground. That's
the
Rabbi
rice.
I'm sorry.
This is the rice or the rabbanon?
Let me see. How? Shivim Kaima, the Hainu Mokum Gedula Shalvash, Chayav Chatas, yeah. Rather, the Rashbam says he's going to be Chayav Chatas. Someone doesn't know mistake. Yeah, they're right, so. Ketayla Shemana Karka. So assuming that this beehive was placed on the ground after it was created, and even so, he's saying it's treated like part of the karka. And by the tziner, we said if it was first created and then placed in the karka, it's passes the mikvah because it doesn't get the din of karka. So that's why Rebbe Eliezer, the Gemara is suggesting this Rebbe Eliezer is Seiser the Brisa. They say it's not like karka. It doesn't have a din of karka. The Rashbam gives examples. What does it mean? This general rule that Rebbe Eliezer said it is like karka. Rebbe Chacham say it's not. They'll say make a din legabe whether you could have a kinyan agav on this and whether how you kind it. Are you kind it with karka is always bekasef shtar b'chazaka, or you kind it like a kli that you kind it with hagbo or with mesira or meshicha or kinyan chotzer. So the Chamaimim in a karka, it's not like karka. Ain't kaisvel a prusbel. It's not considered karka to write a prusbel on it. If the borrower has a prusbel, has karka, makabel is tuma b'mkaima, and is makabel tuma in its place. But right in Shabbos potter, and someone who extracts honey from it on Shabbos is going to be potter because it's karka. And it's not karka; it's a kli. You're just taking. You're allowed to obviously drink water from a cup. You don't say that's taking something from the ground. That's so. This is a kli. It's not considered part of the ground. So no. This is not necessarily a stira. That which Rebbe Eliezer says over there, that the beehive is considered like karka, is not indicative that he disagrees with the brisa of tzina, of a pipe. Awesome, could Rebbe Eliezer time. Rebbe Eliezer gives the reason over there by a beehive why it's considered like karka. Rebbe Eliezer, my time in the Eliezer, the pasuk describes a beehive, and it says he dipped it in the forest of honey. So where is this pasuk again? In Shmuel, and we compare a beehive as a forest of dvash. Just like a forest, if you cut down a branch from a forest, you chayiv on Shabbos for cutting off from the tree. So too, specifically, honey, a beehive is considered to be attached to the ground. And the answer is it's not necessarily something that was first. It has to, by a beehive. It doesn't have to do with the fact of whether it's considered attached to the ground. What the Gemara is saying is it's because, according to Rebbe Eliezer, the reason is because honey is considered to be a product of the beehive. That itself, the fact that it produces something, makes it like karka. We compare the honey produced by a hive to the branches or the fruit that are produced by a forest, and it's considered to be the beehive itself is considered to be productive, and therefore it has a din like karka that taking something from it on Shabbos is going to make you chayiv, and also all the other dinim of karka will flow from that comparison. That it's not because it's not that we disregard the fact. We're not disregarding the fact that it was first built and then attached to the ground. That's not the point. The point is because it's producing honey, that is what makes it to be considered to be mechober lekarka and get the din of karka. But it's which obviously has doesn't have that factor. Then we have Rebbe Eliezer could very well hold, like we said before, that if it was first made and then attached, it would not have a din of karka. Ela Eliezer, so the Gemara says, so that we're rejecting that as a basis for where we say that Rebbe Eliezer is not like, neither Rebbe Eliezer or the Chachamim could be like this brisa. So where do we see the conflict between Rebbe Eliezer and our brisa of Tziner? Ela Eliezer the daf. It's talking about Rebbe Eliezer of a daf, the Tanan. Daf shall nachtaimen. A board used by bakers, which is either a counter that they make their bread on. Nachtam is a baker, so the board that they make the bread on, or the board that they put out in front of their store to sell their bread, shekavu b'kaisel, and they attached it to a wall. So it's now kavua as part of a house. Rebbe Eliezer mitar. Rebbe Eliezer says if you attach it to the wall, it's not considered to be a kli on its own. It's not considered to be a pshutay. At this point, we assume a pshutay kliates. The din is that something that's planed, it's made smooth to be used, even if it doesn't have a receptacle on it. It gets a din of a kli, but since this is attached to the wall, it's no longer a kli, and it's not able to be makabel tuma. The chum say it's tummy. So the Gemara seems to assume this Mishnah does not make a chiluk of whether the board was first attached to the wall and then made into a kli, or if it was first made into a kli and then attached to the wall. In either case, Rebbe Eliezer mitar, the chum mitam. They're both Rebbe Eliezer and the Chachamim in this Mishnah are saying this din, regardless of the sequence of when when this board was attached to the wall, was first made and then attached, or attached and then made. Money. According to Rebbe Eliezer, he seems to be saying in this Mishnah, he says it's tar, so he should say by Yetziner, even chakul b'seif kavu should also be tar, because he does. Rebbe Eliezer legabi the daf does not mechal. It doesn't bother him that it was first made as a daf and then attached to the wall. So that's a din of karka. So let's say Yetziner also. If you first carve it out and then attach it to the floor, it should still become karka and not possible the mikvah. And the Rabbanan, we have the exact opposite problem. Our Mishnah seems to say if you take a stone that's already in the ground, and not our Mishnah, I should say our Brisa says even if you have a stone that's already in the ground and then you dig out a pipe from it, that's going to be considered part of the karka. Even according to the Chacham, our Brisa says it's considered to be part of the ground. And over here we're saying that the daf, even if you first attached a raw board and then made it into a kli by sanding it down, it's going to still, according to Chacham, it's going to be tamei. No, I can give you an explanation. La'olam Rebbe Eliezer. Our brisa could be like Rebbe Eliezer. Rebbe Eliezer had said over here that it's tar even when you first made it into a kli and then attach it. V'shani pshute kliates the tumah derabanan. This is only pshute kliates. This is only this is like we said a flat board. We all know, right? We use our I shouldn't start off with this, but we use pieces of wood on our sukkah, right? We use them for our stach. They're not considered to be pshute kliyates until they're sanded down. And even when they are sanded down, that's only a derabbanan. That's something that doesn't have a receptacle can become tummy. So therefore, that's the reason why Rabbi Eliezer was makel over there. He said that even though you first made into a kli, this type of kli is not a kli d'oraisa. So therefore, he's makel that even though you made it beforehand, it can become part of the karka afterwards when you attach it. So Gemara, Mechlal d'Shiva d'oraisa. That seems to indicate that we're contrasting it with our din of Sinai. But we said, like we mentioned before, that the din that mayim she'uven that's added to a mikvah, passes a mikvah, that's only a derabanan. The midaraisa, the only way mayim she'uven passes a mikvah is if you make a mikvah and you add mayim she'uven to it. But if you have a kosher mikvah and then you add mayim she'uven, even 3 lug, which is enough to pass a mikvah, it doesn't pass a midaraisa. The chama masaka that it passes. And our Bryce of Tziner said that it passes a mikvah. It's talking about where you already have a mikvah that's extant, a current kosher mikvah, by adding the water from this pipe, it passes the mikvah. In addition, our Mishnah, this Mishnah of Daf is not talking about pshute kliyates. This is all presupposed on the distinction that Rabbi Eliezer was makel by a daf shel nechtaimim because it's only derabanan because it's pshute kliyates, but it's not pshute kliyates. It's pshute matches. It's a piece of silver, and a piece of metal, and metal can become tummy even deraisa without a receptacle, without a clay kibble. So the Gemara says, so we really end up with that we don't have a way to answer the issue with Rabbi Eliezer, how Rabbi Eliezer from Daf can go with the Brisa of Tzina. So Gemara says, but Lo'olam Rabbani. However, the Brisa could be like the Rabbanan, who seem to say that there's no distinction between in a daf whether it was first made and then attached to the wall or vice versa. It's always going to be considered to be possible. It's not going to be considered to be part of the wall. B'sha'ani shiva derabbanan, and they'll say fakert, like we concluded. We're talking about a daf shana which is the deraisa by the daf. Therefore, they're mach, and the tziner, they're saying that when it was, if it was first attached to the ground and then made into a pipe, then it's going to be mutter. The Gemara says, what's the reason? If we're saying that the Gemara, I sort of jumped the gun. The Gemara is trying to explicate exactly what the sheet of the Rabbanan is. So they're saying that Chachamim were makel on the Rabbanan. So let's say the Rabbanan are makel regardless of whether it was first made into a pipe and then attached, or vice versa. And we know that's not what the Brisa said. The Brisa said it's only going to be mutter if it was first attached and then made into a kli. So Gemara Shani Hasan the Ikar Torah is kli olav b'talosh. No, the Chama Masakin, they say that the Takanas Chachamim of that Shiva Derabanan, they didn't extend it to a kli that's attached to the ground. But that's only if it didn't already have a shame kli before it was attached, which is the distinction that we've been talking about from the beginning. The Gemara is just, the way I understand it, at least the Pashta Pshat, is that it's saying we make the distinction, even though Chacham are makel on Derabanan, that Derabanan was only chuladik as long as it didn't already have a shame kli. But once it has the shame kli, the Chacham misakin kein deraisa. So if it has a shame kli, it can't later become mechabel lekar. Make shaman shechishav aleim lahadiach esayit strabulin. Ma The din is, as we've come across a number of times over the years, that Eichlin can only become capable of being makabel tuma if water touches them. But that water can't just be any water. If it's water, if it's rain that he has no interest in, it's not considered to be his water. We darshan ki yitan and ki yutan. The Torah requires a certain interesting level of consciousness of this water going onto the eichlin. It has to be on the tvua. It has to be that the person wanted that water. The Torah could have said ki yitan, that when he puts it on, that would mean he has to literally put it on himself. So obviously that would exclude rainwater, but the Torah doesn't. The Torah says kiyutam when it is put on, a passive voice. So that's mashma, even it goes on itself. But it's written, the ksiv is kiyitin. It's written as yitin, which is mashma that he does put it on. So we darshan, that means it has to be something that he wanted the water to be there. So the question is, what did he want the water for? If he wants it, we darshan, the Rashbam says, we darshan that this din that he wants the water has to be for something that's not mechubal karka. If it's mechubal karka, then that's not considered the kind of wanting the water that would make the eichlim be chokshel lekabel tuma. So again, make sham shachivim lahadiyach hasayit shtrablim. He wanted this water because he wanted to clean off his rechaim holder, which we said in the Mishnah. We quoted the beginning part of that brisa that really says over the din of the Mishnah, and we said Rebbe Eliezer says that machteshes is always going to be, whether it was first made into machteshes or later, it's always going to be sold along with the house. So certainly its trouble is also going to be considered part of the house. So what about this water that he put to clean the tztabo, mao? So Zok the Gemara, mao is right. Does it make any plants or tvua that he has, that water, that since this strabel is connected to the ground, do we say he wanted the water for something that's mechubal karka, and therefore it's not considered that he wanted water for the type of purpose that would be able to be machshir, to be makabel tuma, or we say that this strabel is not. So the Gemara says, I'll leave the according to Rebbe Eliezer, it certainly is going to be considered karka. He says even something that was first made and then attached is considered to be karka. So certainly that strabel is. Who said that something that's chakuka and then attached to the ground is not considered, is going to be not going to consider to be so long with the house because it's not considered karka. So Gemara, Teku. It's not a good question. We have to leave this unresolved. Shalcher of Nechemia Breder of Yosef Lerab, Breder of Huna. Zuti, Breder of Huna Zuti, Lenada. Ki asya hach isel lekamach. When this woman comes to you, the din is, we came across this in Subis, a daughter whose father dies, an unmarried daughter whose father dies, the Yerusha goes to the sons. But there's an exception that she is entitled to a certain amount that the Chum have to figure out, the Bezin has to figure out how much he would have given as a nadan. And we say, without any indication, otherwise, if we don't have a way of determining what the father intended, we give 1/10 of the Yerusha to each unmarried daughter for her nadan. So we say, however, this nadan only comes from karka. We paskin like Rebbe Eliezer that something that's attached to the ground is considered to be like karka, and you could collect this 10th of the Yerusha, which is only from karka, for the unmarried daughter from its Trabuli Derechai. He said, not only could you collect from these Rechaim, because they're considered not these Rechaim, it's Strabuli, because it's considered to be karka, but even if someone has a right to get rent, he has a property rented out, and the person is going to later, the renter is going to is going to be mechuyev to pay the rent in a year, since that's coming because of the father's ownership of the karka of the apartment. So that is also considered to be karka, and that could also be used as the basis for the dinan. Will also come a tenth of that. Okay, Yasher Koyach. Have a good Shabbos. Sorry, I see I went a little longer than I
You.
wanted.